Hey readers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire Books, and today I want to do a video about a book that's just kind of haunting me since I finished it, and that is Daddy's Gone A-Hunting by Penelope Mortimer. This book is like a window into another time, but it's also a time that might be becoming our own time again. It's essentially the tale of a desperate housewife whose life is just terrible, and we'll talk about that, who was forced into this life because she got pregnant. Abortion was illegal in Britain at the time. So it's set in like the British suburbs, and she was forced to marry a man that she really maybe didn't want to be married to. And they've been together and they're just making a life of it, but it's not great. And her daughter, who is now 19 and studying at Oxford, comes to her and says, "I'm pregnant. I don't want to be a parent." And so she helps her daughter arrange an illegal abortion. So that's essentially what the book is about. But it's about a lot more than that, just because of the way that the characters' lives in this book are described. So, yeah, I mean, the abortion plot line is part of it, but what the book's really about is how miserable and unable to connect the main character is. So this mother, Ruth, has a strained relationship with her daughter, and so does her husband, as it happens, probably because they did not have her by choice. They had to have this child. And so both of them are sort of weirdly disconnected from their own daughter, who feels a difference in the love that they have for her versus what they feel for the two sons that they had of their own free will later in the marriage. And on top of that, Ruth, because she never really got to live her life, is really shoehorned into the role of mother, and she doesn't really know who she is other than that. And so when the boys are in boarding school, and, her daughter is at Oxford studying, and she's going to go off into the world on her own, Ruth is alone most of the week. Her husband, works in London all week and then comes home on the weekends sometimes. And so she's just drowning in isolation. She has nothing to do. She has no sense of purpose, and she's just increasingly desperate as the book goes on for some kind of connection, for some kind of meaning to exist in her life. And it's just the saddest thing in the world to read, because people interpret her breakdown as just like, oh, silly Ruth, oh, poor Rex, he's got a crazy wife, or the kids keep saying things like, oh, poor old mom, and it's just tragic to watch. And what Penelope Mortimer suggests is that the other women in her neighborhood are also quietly desperate and miserable. And the book really bears that out in their social interactions, in the things that they're interested in, the way they're living their lives. It's just really clear that you're dealing with a lot of really unsatisfied people with very little that they can do about it. And I think that, in a way, this book is maybe the most compelling argument for choice about when and how to start a family, because the negative impacts of being forced to do it and being forced to conform socially are so prevalent throughout the book. Rex, the husband, is a jerk, and I did not like him, but it's also clear that he too is emotionally stunted and unable to connect. This is a way of living in society that hurts everyone. It's also clear that society's kind of changing, so Ruth sort of meekly accepts her fate and has a baby when she's younger and marries Rex. Their daughter, who is now in the same position that her mother was in, never really considers remaining pregnant and then eventually having a baby. She is like, well, if you won't help me find a better option, I'm going to go to the lady who will do this with a catheter unsafely in her apartment, but I am not marrying my boyfriend because no, and I'm not becoming a parent right now. And it's very clear that she's a bit nonconformist compared to her mother, and she sees the world as full of more options than Ruth has seen. And that's a really interesting thing to watch. Social change is kind of happening in the book. And then the other thing that's really fascinating is that the act of helping her daughter get an abortion is fascinating, because Ruth is able to connect with her daughter more than she ever has, maybe, and it really gives her a sense of purpose. But it's also one of those secret things that's really uncomfortable and kind of drives them apart at the same time. So the complexities that this introduces to the mother-daughter relationship are interesting, and it's, Penelope Mortimer does a really good job of kind of meditating on the right things. So emotionally, this book really packs a punch. I kind of stared off into space for a long time after I finished it, and it took me a couple days before I was ready to really dig into another serious book. I had to read some kind of filler to get over this one. But Penelope Mortimer's writing is so good. She writes very stark prose that's, that you don't feel like she's wasting words. She's not really overdoing anything. But also very interesting is she cuts like a scalpel in terms of pointing out social BS and how uncomfortable everybody is. And that is really, really fascinating to read. So basically, she can have everybody at a party and they're just talking about a bunch of nonsense around, I don't know, Christmas time. And you will immediately be aware of how uncomfortable and unhappy everyone is. But she doesn't just say everyone's uncomfortable and unhappy. She does a really good job of creating like super stilted dialogue, like super awkward social interactions that really make you feel the disconnect. And she also does a really great job of that when depicting, conversations between Ruth and her husband. Like you can feel their mutual frustration, and it's so intense because you kind of know where they're both coming from because you've been reading the book. And their miscommunications are frustrating, but they also feel just totally authentic. Like Mortimer does an amazing job of capturing a screwed up relationship that's not working between people who don't know how to talk to each other. And then similarly, she does a good job with the way that the daughter is depicted because she's so distant from her mother and her frustrations, and maybe in a way her like ingratitude for her mother and her lack of understanding of her mom. All of those things come through without you feeling like you're being hit over the head with it. Instead, you get to experience Ruth's feelings of frustration and disconnect in ways that are just really profound. Of course, Penelope Mortimer also does a really good job of distinguishing between like how men are treated in this time and women, and it's really a very feminist book without being like feminism. Everything is just really shown through the situations in the book. So if you're like really reading it and going off with the story, instead of you getting like an argument for why you should be a certain way, you get that visceral feeling of frustration and feeling trapped that people are experiencing. And there are also some just really good like wry comments in there, like sprinkled in. So before Angela, the daughter, decides that she's not going to marry the boyfriend and that they're not going to have a baby, he comes over to the house to meet the parents. And it's really funny, like, the guy's clearly an asshole, and he gets along great with the dad. And Ruth, the mom, is sitting there thinking like, oh my God, like this is the same situation I was in. This guy's kind of a prick. Like, but she's like, well, I guess if this is the one my daughter wants, he's a man and he'll make a success of it. Because like she can tell that he's not really that great, but also that that's not going to impact his future or his life because he's a man living in a man's world. And just those little moments where she can kind of see how things might work and see how the power dynamics are, how the social relationships are working. It all is just really profound in its kind of bleak, like bougie way. And the other thing that was really cool, I thought, was that the abortion plotline is really well done. Ruth, the mother, is very concerned that her daughter is going to have like a very dangerous back alley abortion. In order to get the closest thing possible to a real doctor to do it, she taps into a whisper network, and it's really interesting to see how that happens and who that connects her with. She has to deal with like a lot of shame and like paperwork that's like really uncomfortable. It's very obvious that even doctors who are willing to perform the procedure view it in kind of an insulting way and view women in an insulting way. And then also, just the inherent kind of risk and scariness of the procedure is there, but it's very understated. And then, the daughter's responses to everything are also really interesting because it's so clear that this is what she truly wants and that she is making a choice and her mom's helping her make a choice that's really right for her. And so all of that comes together into this just really fascinating book that, honestly, it's written in 1958 and it still feels really real. It's clearly from another time and you can kind of get that sense. But because the prose is so well done and because the relationships are so subtly built, it still has this breath of modernity to it that makes it a good read now. And then, of course, now in our current time in the United States where Roe versus Wade is now gone and those protections are gone, you can really feel the fear of being trapped the way that this book's women are trapped on a whole new level. And the book itself provides maybe a good way to think through the life of someone who is in that trap. So you know, we like to talk about rational arguments about political issues. But this book is good because it makes it really about the people who are dealing with the situation and the kind of suffering that they might undergo. And I feel like that's really important in this particular moment in time. So that's Daddy's Gone A-Hunting by Penelope Mortimer. I highly recommend that you read it unless you are just in a bad emotional state right now, in which case wait, because it's not like a total tragedy fest, but it also kind of is. And you'll see what I mean when you read it. It's haunting. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and if you've read this book, I want to know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and happy reading.